Hello, I'm Bret Moss, and you're watching The Defining Moment for Creating the Culture of Conscience. Our guest today is Khalid Shah. Khalid Shah is the founder and executive director of Stop the Violence, Increase the Peace Foundation here in Southern California. His foundation empowers communities in Southern California to prevent gang violence and provide hope for youth at risk. He's also the chairman of the Regional Violence Prevention Coalition. Khalid Shah, welcome back to The Defining Moment. It's really an honor for me to welcome you back here to our show.
Thank you, Bret.
Thanks for being here. Our topic today is waging peace on the gang epidemic in Los Angeles. And I'd like to begin by asking you to share a defining moment from your own life.
One of the defining moments, Bret, in my life, again, relates to the work that I do. I remember about 5 years ago at our offices in Inglewood, a young man, 13, 14 years old, who had been sent to our program through the probation department, coming in for a program one afternoon crying and wanting to speak with me. And he wanted to share something with me that he couldn't share with his family, his parents, his teachers, and I guess with anybody else. And he wanted to share with me that he had just been involved in a shooting that took place. What was interesting about that, Bret, is that that young man represented so much pain in our community, young lives that will be lost, not only the lives of people who do the shooting and the drive-bys, but the lives of the people who are affected by that, the families, etc. It made me realize how important this work is and how important it is that we all work together in order to stop the violence in our communities.
Okay, very clear. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. There are presently an estimated 120,000 active gang members here in Southern California. Why have our civic leaders been stuck on stupid for so many years in terms of addressing this epidemic that is affecting so many young people?
Well, Bret, that's a good question. You know, while I believe that many of our law enforcement officers and those folk who are out in the street every day fighting violence and crime and many times putting their lives on the line have been doing that with the greatest intentions, absolutely doing the best job that they can. I believe basically that we have lacked the political will to direct that energy in the right areas. Same officers, same individuals out there dealing with many of those kids who are labeled gang members, who in fact are just youngsters out in the streets looking for a place to be somebody, looking for an identity. I believe that those talents can be used in a much more constructive way. Recently, at a press conference that Chief Bratton had, and I've spoken on many occasions with Sheriff Baca, they will themselves tell you that we cannot arrest away this problem. But it took a long time to come to that conclusion. And the fact is, I don't know what the reason is that it took so long, that we've been in a 25-year epidemic of violence and crime and murder with over 10,000 young people being killed over the last 2 decades. I don't know. But I do know this. We are at a place now where we're talking the kind of language in threes that makes sense to dealing with the issues of violence. That's prevention, intervention, and then suppression. At one time, it was only suppression, only lock them up, only dollars to put away our young people. Just recently, the state Senate just passed a bill that was authored by Senator Dianne Feinstein that puts $1 billion on the streets to deal with the issue of gang violence in our community. Half of that money is going for suppression, victim services, the other half for prevention and intervention. So I think that we're at a critical crossroads in our struggle and in this war against violence and crime in our community. And I hope that it will take us to the place we need to be.
Okay, very clear. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Tell us more why it's impossible for law enforcement to simply arrest away the problem of gang violence.
Well, basically, it's because it's a quick fix solution. You may lock up a kid today, but ultimately 90% of the 2.2 million people locked up in prisons today in our community, they're coming home. They're our neighbors, and they're folks who we're going to have to interface with and socialize with and eat and cut lawns with and go to the wash house with every day. We're going to have to deal with those folk. So at the end of the day, we know the more we lock people up, the more people are eventually coming home. And I think the big factor that's missing in that conversation is what happens to those individuals when they go to jail.
Yes.
What happens to a young person? And let me give you a scenario that I think is important for suburbia, for folks who are not as affected by this problem. Little Johnny, living in a nice, cushioned Beverly Hills, Bel Air environment, never been any problems, never had any issues, but he's a little rebellious, ends up getting into a situation, riding in a car with a friend who commits a crime. He ends up going to jail because of that commitment of offense. And the way the criminal justice system is set up is totally different from the world that you and I can imagine. It is not a world that talks, a world of understanding. It is not a world that understands problems as you and I understand them. It's a world of black and white, strong and weak, life and death. And little Johnny or whoever is in that situation has to make a decision immediately. He has to make a life and death decision whether he is going to survive as a human being to keep his dignity or die as a man. And surviving may mean having to become violent, fight, and even, if necessary, take somebody's life in order to maintain his own. That's the environment that our young people are thrust into. Over the last 10 years, there's been a decline in even the conversation about rehabilitation. It's been about locking our kids up and throwing away the key. So many of the programs that would help them make a transition back into the community are gone. So by the time little Johnny gets 3 to 4 years into his sentence, either he's a hardcore criminal who has learned how to survive in a prison environment just like a soldier learns how to survive on a battlefield, or he's a broken shell of an individual, a broken shell of a man. And most of those youngsters are going to choose the former because nobody wants to live in shame. And so the critical thing for us to know is that one day little Johnny is coming home. And when he comes home, what is he coming home to? What is his reactions going to be? How is he going to relate to a situation of anger? How is he going to relate to rejection of being an ex-con, an ex-felon, can't get a job because of his record? Those are the kinds of questions that we need to be asking as a society. And I think it capsulizes what is meant when we say we can't arrest away the problem, because in fact, little Johnny might have just made a bad judgment, but now he was placed into a situation where he is now part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Very clear. Thank you so much. There are currently some very promising initiatives in Los Angeles County, such as the Advancement Project, to address the epidemic of gang activity. What's being done by community leaders, government officials, religious leaders, and law enforcement officials to find a comprehensive solution to the epidemic?
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the Advancement Project, because I know Connie Rice and Billy Weiss and some of the other folk who authored and worked on that particular project. And I think it is comprehensive as a strategy in and of itself, because it talks about taking the hot zones in the community and turn them into safe havens and funneling the resources into those areas to not only prevent violence, but intervene and work with gang intervention agencies and work with folks who are doing the ground level work, while at the same time working with law enforcement to make sure that 5 or 10% of violent criminals who are really involved in crimes are locked away, because absolutely we have to look at the reality. If you have an individual who is out there committing crimes for any reason, hurting people, that person has to be taken out of society. They have to be dealt with. But the majority of those young people, we believe, can be saved. And I think that's what the Advancement Project is talking about. So therein, I believe that it offers all of us an opportunity. The County Board of Supervisors is looking at that same report as we speak, and drafting legislation and dialogue out of that. I know Sheriff Baca has put together a report based on Connie's Advancement Project report. Senator Mark Ridley Thomas has looked at it. They have a report out, UCLA. The Regional Violence Prevention Coalition, which is our coalition of 120 agencies in and around Los Angeles, San Bernardino, and Riverside. We're all coalescing to take pieces of that project and see how we can work on the prevention end. I think it is critical. And I think what's going on right now is a lot of scurrying and coming together, and folks trying to find out how they can tie into that report. And make part of that report. And I left out the mayor of the city of Los Angeles, Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa. They also have a plan on the table. So I think that community leaders are working on how to bring all of that together as we speak.
Okay, very
Yes.
interesting. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I think many people in our nation and here in California, we look at gangs as the enemy of peace,
Right.
the enemy of civilized life,
Right.
The good life. Why is it insufficient in addressing the problem of gang violence to simply look at them as the enemy?
Without a doubt, bad, good, or indifferent, there are children. And that's important, whether they're gang members or not. Gangs can mean one thing in one community and another thing in another community. And I think that in and of itself can cause a problem. Under the California state statute, I think the title 18622 is the penal code for a gang in the state of California, which is different from the federal version, even though they share some of the same components. I think what we have to be careful of is stigmatizing young people with the names of gangs. Any 2 or 3 young people in a setting that might or might not be doing something that somebody is uncomfortable with can be classified as a gang. They may be a football team, they may be a soccer team, they may be a rugby team, depending on who's looking and how they're looking at them. I think it's just very important that we be very, 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 very clear about what a gang really is. Because as we talk about locking up more and more young people in particular as a result of gang involvement, some gang members are identified by the way they dress. And we talked about earlier the culture that we live in that is almost a mirror of the gang lifestyle. So you may find kids who are dressing the part. So it's important that we're careful about how we label our kids with that title gang. And again, be able to clearly identify what a gang is and what a gang is not. The issue of gang violence, at least in my opinion, is a defining issue in and of itself. For me, it defines how we see ourselves as a society, not only by the environment that we leave for our kids to come up in, but also how we respond to it. Whether we respond in a barbaric, unforgiving, inhumane way on children, or whether we look at the root of why are our children doing what they're doing and what can we better do to help them not do it.
Yeah, very clear, thank you. What's missing from our education system in Southern California that leaves so many young people vulnerable to gangs?
Wow, that's a heavy question, Bret, because I just left a school district yesterday, and there's just so many issues just in the districts in and of themselves. Before we could even start to deal with the children who were having issues, we had to go through a myriad of problems with the staff and structure and how instruction was being, how teachers were treating kids and how kids were responding to teachers, and the cultural differences and the economic disparities, and that went on for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Before we even got a chance to start talking about, now, how do we service the kids?
And you're just talking about one school.
One school.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a big piece of the pie. If you look at it, our kids are held in schools longer than any other institution in society.
Yeah.
Even more so than in the family sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course.
On a conscious level.
Mm-hmm.
They're there all day. Other kids, other people, other situations. So when you look at when we were going to school, it was about a teacher involved in dealing with those kids and making them better and helping them and taking personal interest in those kids and making them better. Today, there is just so many issues that our schools are dealing with as it relates to reading, writing, and arithmetic. So that question in and of itself is a little difficult to answer because there are so many different factors.
It's so complex.
It is so complex when you look at, man, the teacher issue, the jobs issue, the issue of how the kids come to school. School teachers, what I've been told, the teachers feel like they have to be parents as opposed to teachers. And maybe they should be in some instances, but it takes away from them having to, if they've got to feed a kid because the kid hadn't ate that morning and their temper is bad and they don't want to sit down, if they've got to be a social worker and deal with social issues, if they have to be a mental health, do a dual diagnosis right on the spot for a kid who may have some mental issues. Wow. We have a system that's broke. We have a system that's broke. And I think it is symptomatic of what's going on in society. I think society right now is broke. And I think we need to take a look at who we are. This is part of the bigger problem. It is all related. It's all interrelated.
Yeah.
Education, health care, the socioeconomic realities that we're dealing with, the cultural aspect. Entertainment is a huge, huge, huge piece.
Well, you've got all the students in the school being influenced individually by the media that they watch and listen to.
Huge. Mm-hmm. Huge, huge, huge. So I say the next revolution that will have to take place in order to bring us where we need to be as it relates to God, family, and country is right here. Mm-hmm. On the stage of entertainment, on the stage of media. Mm-hmm. I say that this gang issue is a defining issue for all of us because it makes us take a look at who we are, how we're going to deal with this, how we're going to deal with our kids.
Yeah. And, for many years, people living in the suburban areas in California have been able to ignore it. However, now there's a phenomenon occurring where the gang culture is now basically spreading and expanding into suburbia.
Absolutely.
So now there's, in a sense, even a more of an interest on the part of the middle-class communities, upper middle-class communities, to take some kind of action.
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right. More of the calls that we're getting now are coming from the Palisades, or coming from West Hollywood, or coming from Glendale, or some of the areas that years ago were not affected by the gang violence. And these mothers and fathers and parents are horrified by what they see. They're horrified about what it's saying about our society because they know that they've done everything they could in order to raise their children the way that they were raised. And so you're absolutely right. Now this gang thing is like a virus, and it's something that it's like, I got a cold, Bret. You're close to me, you're going to catch that cold. If you got the flu, you can give the flu to Brimmer over there. At the end of the day, we're all affected. It affects all of us. And if not directly, economically. When you look at the economic impact of violence on a society, what one gunshot wound cost from the time that an ambulance picks that person up, takes them to the hospital, the doctors treat that person, and if that person survives, the medical cost that happens over the years can be into the billions. Mm-hmm. So, we're all affected on some level about, regarding crime and violence in our community. So it is a defining moment for us. This moment is, in my humble opinion, as defining as was slavery, mm-hmm. was the civil rights movement, suffrage movement, and other defining moments in our country that spoke about who we are and who we say we are based on our founding fathers' promises.
Mm-hmm. Okay, very clear. Thank you.
Yeah.
What are the most important ways in which religious leaders can work together to provide the spiritual support necessary to wage peace and rescue youth from the evils of gang culture?
That's a beautiful question, because I believe that none of this is possible without the spiritual component, the same component that brought religious communities together during the time of Dr. Martin Luther King, and the social movements of all of the religious folk who came together, who believed in God, who believed in a better way, and believed in a better principle of life for all people. I believe that if our religious leadership in our communities would stop and take a look at their prior successes and how the church in particular moved the social agenda forward for everybody, I think that we will have moved a long way in trying to make things better. One of the things that I see today that is getting better, but bothered me at one point was it seemed as if many of the church leaders were all working independent of each other.
Concerned about their own church.
Concerned exclusively about their own flock, their own people, their own situations. And as a result of that, it left a huge vacuum as far as the body of Christ. Mm. We had the foot doing one thing and the hand doing something else. The ears listening to one thing and the eyes seeing something else. And so the body actually not functioning as a single unit.
And in today's reality, you also have the interfaith component, that not
Absolutely.
everyone, not all the actors that you need to have
Right.
at the table
Absolutely.
are Christians. You've
Absolutely.
got Muslims, you've
Right.
got Jewish people,
Right.
you've got faiths from all over the world.
Absolutely. And I think that here's a question that was posed to me by a young person. Mr. Shah, how is it you tell me about religion, you tell me about organizations, and you asked us to stop the gangbanging. How can you ask us to stop the gangbanging when I see so much gangbanging going on between the churches and the religions and the organizations? How can you lead if you're not leading by example?
You're talking about a kind of self-centered mentality.
Absolutely.
When it comes to my own religion.
Absolutely. And so I think the movement to bring those interfaith communities together is the wave of the future, is the future. Because ultimately, we are all God's children. We are all God's children. And the enemy, in my humble opinion, has to be extremism on any end. It has to be that thing that takes us beyond what God said. And God said that all of his children are important in his eyesight.
Yeah.
And the minute we start thinking that one is better than the other or one is less, then I think that we've missed the point. We've missed the mark, no matter what religion we say we believe in.
And simply just to be effective in dealing with the issues that we have, we have to tear down the walls that divide us.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, because there may be a group of people that I can't get to. There may be a group of people you can't get to, but I can. I can't get to, but you can. And at the end of the day, we're all striving for the same thing, peace and a better society. So what better way to show family than to bring the entire family of God-fearing people together?
Yeah, very clear. Thank you so much.
Yes.
What have you discovered to be the most effective way to go about brokering peace between rival gangs bent on destroying each other?
Well, that is a beautiful question, because again, it begs for the answer that is not the most obvious answer in that scenario. But I found the most effective way to broker those kinds of situations is the young people who are involved in those situations, for them to broker it themselves, and for us to be supportive of those efforts and to support and be the wraparound services for them to bring those things into fruition that they are trying to make happen, because they speak their own language. They have their own mores and their own frames of references by which they can make something happen here or make something happen there. And so as we go in with a good heart, we make sure that we're not disrespectful because we don't know. So when they're at the table brokering their peace, we have many ex-gang, former gang members who are out in the community today doing some great, great work. I think that that is probably, in my humble opinion, you know, I talked about the truce that we put together in the city of Inglewood and some other clusters that we've worked in. It has always been done by the young people themselves in those communities.
In other words, for it to last, it has to be of their initiative.
It has to be.
It can't be something imposed upon them.
Absolutely, you know, and it has to be something that they buy into and that makes sense to them, and that everybody benefits from, and obviously we all benefit when our community is peaceful.
Okay, well, on that note, Khalid Shah, I want to thank you so much once again for having been our guest today on The Defining Moment. It's really been a pleasure and an honor for me to have you here.
Thank you so much, Bret.
Thank you.
God bless.
You've been watching The Defining Moment for creating the culture of conscience. You can find us on the internet at www.definingmoment.tv. Thanks for watching and have a great day.